we need to do it, whether Trump is, beating us up or not, because we are in effect in a hybrid war with Russia at the moment. Russia is constantly attacking us with cyber attacks. It has conducted an assassination campaign across Europe. It's cutting our cables. We need to do far more to counter this threat anyway.
And a very warm welcome to Juliet Samuel now, who's a columnist for The Times and has a really, really interesting read in the paper today discussing Britain's nuclear deterrent and nuclear firepower. Welcome to you, Juliet.
Hi there. How are you?
I'm well, Juliet. It's a really, really compelling read, this. And you argue that we need to make our nuclear deterrent much more independent from America, apart from many other points. Do take us through your thoughts.
Yes, well, there's been a lot of discussion of many different elements of European rearmament. And I think that although a lot of us knew that Trump was going to do a lot of new things and, shake things up as he had last time, I think the speed and the extent to which he is reorienting American foreign policy has taken a lot of people by surprise and raised a lot of questions that were before unthinkable. And one of those questions is, which particularly relates to NATO and the prospect of British peacekeepers being, anywhere near the border with Russia, which is that if Europe is going to get itself into that situation, if Britain is going to, push the boundaries of our security arrangements in that way, and potentially find ourselves in, confrontation with one of the world's two major nuclear powers, then isn't one of the areas where we need to rearm and think seriously about whether we're sufficiently equipped is in our nuclear weapons arsenal.
And a big part of that argument is our dependence on American support for our nuclear weaponry, because we do rely, when it comes certainly to the Trident boats and the long-range strategic nuclear weapons aboard those submarines, they do depend on American support.
Well, they do, and they don't in the sense that so the British nuclear program has always been fairly intertwined with the American nuclear program, but over the last 30 years, we've become particularly dependent on shared facilities for building and maintaining things, mainly to cut costs. So our nuclear deterrent at the moment consists of 4 submarines, 2 of which are always meant to be at sea. We build our own warheads, we build our own submarines, but we do not build our own missiles. That we pay America to build for us, Lockheed Martin. And about every 8 years, our submarines have to go over to Kings Bay in Georgia and essentially refresh the missiles, get them refurbished or get new ones. Within those 8 years, we're not dependent upon the US, in a doomsday scenario where the Prime Minister actually wanted to fire nukes. But we are dependent upon the US for maintaining and replacing them.
Yes.
And it's a measure just of how unthinkable American foreign policy is right now, that there are serious questions being asked as to whether that relationship for the next generation of the nuclear deterrent is safe and sustainable for us.
And who would have imagined we'd be having this conversation, you'd be writing a piece like this just not so very long ago at all. And your piece and your argument, it doesn't just focus on those Trident boats and the strategic nuclear weapons. It is about smaller nukes as well, of which it seems we just don't have that many.
Yeah, well, we have none, in fact. We have what would be thought to be a small warhead in, nuclear hydrogen bomb terms, but we don't have any way of launching it that signals that it's a small warhead. So if we wanted, for example, to, this is, I should say a dire scenario, and all of what I'm writing is intended to build up so that we do not get into this scenario. But if we wanted to respond to, say, a small tactical nuclear attack, we would have to right now launch a missile from a submarine, and the country it was targeting would have no way of knowing that this wasn't a city-killing massive hydrogen bomb. So if we look at the Russian arsenal, they have about 5,000 massive nuclear warheads, and it's estimated they have probably over 2,000 what are called tactical nukes, which are generally smaller, but also key to them is that they can be launched from land or from air. And what that means is we had, during the Cold War, there was a general, a lot of thinking done about the concept of controlled escalation. You didn't want to be in a position where you were either could do nothing and had to remain in conventional warfare if someone had attacked you, or you had to unleash Armageddon and start bombing whole cities. You wanted to have a ladder of escalation where if someone did something, you could respond in kind. And that's what the UK doesn't have at the moment. France kind of has that capacity, but not to the degree that we would want to. And so we have about 300 large hydrogen bombs, but we don't have any of the smaller tactical nukes that you would want to sort of fill out the deterrent.
Right. Now, if France and maybe Britain are going to provide some sort of nuclear shield for Europe, as opposed to the shield, the use of those weapons as part of a NATO deterrent, because let's say we can't trust America, it raises the question: should Europe chip into the cost of those nuclear weapons? Now, I put this to a couple of European ministers on the programme today for reasons it's easy to understand. They didn't really want to go there, but it's a real question.
Yeah, absolutely, they should. And as to whether it would replace NATO or, would it be instead of NATO or would it be within NATO is slightly unclear, because right now it's estimated there are about 100 American tactical nuclear weapons around Europe at the disposal of NATO. They're guarded by American troops. So as a starting point, a UK and French ambition should be to replace those warheads with French or with British ones, and to guard them with our own troops, so that we are in no way dependent upon a US decision to launch. And that may well mean bringing it out of NATO. But certainly, I think if you're going to invest a lot of money in creating a new nuclear shield for Europe that is autonomous of the US, then it is entirely reasonable to expect, other European countries to chip in on the cost.
Yeah, and I'm sure. Well, it looks likely to become a quite interesting and lively discussion, maybe before long. Juliet Samuel, though, for now, thank you so much for joining us. Columnist there for the Times newspaper. You can see her column there in the Times today, and I really warmly recommend it. Now, let's welcome our next guest to the programme, someone of experience and expertise. It is Sir David Manning, who's a former British ambassador to NATO and to the United States, who's now director at Gatehouse Advisory Partners. Afternoon to you, David. Thank you for joining us.
John.
Can we just start with your reflections on this moment in history? And it is one where we see leaders like Macron and Merz pretty openly saying we cannot rely on America anymore. This is a huge shift.
It is a huge shift. We've had a seismic shift in the last 6 or 8 weeks, ever since President Trump returned to the White House. And there is great uncertainty about what his intentions are vis-a-vis Europe, but in terms of all foreign policy. And so, the world has been turned upside down, and we're living at a moment of great volatility, great uncertainty, and we have to try and recalibrate to take account of this. And it's clearly going on day by day at the moment, John.
And how do you weigh up the United Kingdom's place in this picture? Well, the Prime Minister, for reasons that we understand, and with some success, is trying to tread this delicate diplomatic line between America and Europe.
Yes, that will be the task. He will want to maintain the best possible working relationship with President Trump, aware, though, that we have all the uncertainties to which you've alluded, while at the same time, I think, accelerating what was already a beginning of a rapprochement with European partners. We clearly, the worst case scenario is very bleak. We're not there. It's not clear that Trump will give up on NATO. He's been equivocal about it. He's been rude about it. But we haven't got to the stage where we know that actually he's going to give up.
No.
Is he actually urging us to do much more? And if we do much more and meet at least some of his requirements, will this be enough for him to sustain NATO as we hope, and on which we have depended for so long?
And whether or not, though, David, President Trump formally walks away from NATO, that may never happen in that start form. But is there a case, though, for European leaders to get together and put together some sort of mutual security understanding and formalise it? It doesn't have to be in place of NATO. It can be alongside NATO, but it would be a sort of European NATO. Can you see that coming around?
Yes, I can. I think that it's probably where we're headed. I think the contacts between the Prime Minister, between President Macron, I suspect when the incoming German Chancellor it takes office, Mr. Merz, I suspect we will find a great deal of discussion about this. I don't see myself that much greater European coordination and identity need be at odds with NATO. I don't think we should start from the position of saying we're going to try and replace NATO. I think it should be to reinforce NATO. But I think European leaders would be failing in their duty if they didn't look at this issue and start to think very hard about what we can do. And I just say, John, we need to do it, whether Trump is, beating us up or not, because we are in effect in a hybrid war with Russia at the moment. Russia is constantly attacking us with cyber attacks. It has conducted an assassination campaign across Europe. It's cutting our cables. We need to do far more to counter this threat anyway. And we've run down our armed forces to an alarming degree. And it's not just Britain.
Yes.
So we ought to be doing this anyway, and showing that the Europeans are back, to coin a phrase, is very important.
Well, so if we are then, as you believe, heading towards the establishment of some sort of European NATO, nuclear defence, a nuclear shield over the European powers, that would need to be part of that. That would need to be thought through very carefully, wouldn't it? And the role of Britain in all of that. We have our own independent nuclear deterrent. We'd need to be at that table too and change the way we look at it.
Yeah, I think it's enormously complicated. And I was listening to Juliet Samuel, very interesting, on our nuclear capabilities and our shortcomings. This is an enormously complicated area. As she was explaining, at the moment we depend on America crucially for our own independent nuclear deterrent. We are deficient in tactical nuclear weapons, as she was explaining. The French nuclear deterrent is not, in systems terms, compatible with ours. There would be issues about targeting. There would be issues about decision making.
Yes.
So all of this is it's enormously complicated. This is why I come back to the point I made at the beginning, John. We don't want to have to go here. But of course, given the uncertainties that we've got, we have to start thinking about what if.
Yes.
What we don't want to do is give the impression we're keen to move away from the arrangements we've got already.
Okay. Now, I wonder what you make about the idea, the report that this may be under consideration. It's not confirmed, but the group of powers, the Five Eyes group of nations, rewriting their rules of intelligence cooperation because of a lack of trust now in America. Tulsi Gabbard is America's national security, as it were, overseer, and she has been in the past sympathetic to Vladimir Putin. Do you think that Britain and the other powers need to start cutting back of what is shared with America in intelligence for fear of it leaking and agents, for example, being put at risk?
Well, I think one has to look at the people on the other side of this and say they have some very doubtful, some doubtful records. So I'm certainly not in charge of what our agencies can and can't do. And some of this is going to be very difficult to dismantle, and we won't want to do this. But I can absolutely see that, if you have very sensitive intelligence and you're responsible for, let's say, the lives of agents or whatever it may be, you have to be very, very circumspect in what you do. So I think this is, again, an issue that is now on the table, and we will have to think about it. We are very closely entwined. We won't want to have to rethink these. And again, we're at the, what if scenarios. It's the worst case scenario, but it'd be idle to pretend that we can ignore it.
All right. So, David Manning, really good to hear your thoughts, as always, the former British ambassador to NATO and to the United States.